To talk about the impact that the second Donald Trump presidency can have on trade ties between India and the United States, we're joined now live from Washington, D.C. by Ambassador Atul Keshap. Atul Keshap is the president of the US-India Business Council. He's been in important roles in government, both in the United States as well as serving in India. Thank you very much, Ambassador Keshap, for joining us. President Trump has spoken multiple times during this campaign about wanting to increase trade tariffs with India. Can you begin by giving our viewers a sense of how soon do you think these are likely to be brought into place, and what impact do you think increasing tariffs within America could have on the trade relations between Delhi and D.C.?
Well, Rahul, first of all, thank you for having me. Let me say that in the conversations I've had with friends from the Trump administration, and in what I have read about statements by Mr. Lighthizer and President Trump and others, I think that they are going to start taking actions from day one. I don't think they intend to wait very long in all of this. These are very set policies in that administration to come. And so it will have an impact on U.S.-India trade ties. There is a perception, whether you agree or not, that there is an imbalance, a structural imbalance in America's trade ties with many countries around the world. We have been running a chronic trade deficit for decades. And so President Trump and his advisors have been very clear about the need to address that. And they have concerns about imbalanced trade, and they want to get at the structural causes of it. And they view tariffs as the instrument to do so. So it will have an impact, and it will likely have a fairly dramatic and immediate impact.
Now, America is one of the few countries with whom India has a trade surplus to the extent of about $36.74 billion last year. That's something that Donald Trump, you're saying, wants to aggressively counter. Which are the sectors that you think are most likely to be impacted in case President Trump does push through on his promise of increasing trade barriers with India?
Well, here's how I'd like to address that. First of all, I think that there is an opportunity here for Delhi and for the Indian people. If you think about it, President Trump has very good relations with Prime Minister Modi. Indeed, look at the telephone call yesterday and the tweets of congratulations. There is a real warmth there, and it stretches back to the first Trump administration. That is a point of leverage for the Indian people. And I think that what the Trump administration is going to be looking for is to see which of its partners around the world are, frankly, willing to play ball, or, if you will, make a deal. And if India telegraphs early on that it is ready to be a collaborative and productive partner and to engage on what the American people have said clearly through the ballot box are their concerns about their economic relations around the world, then there is an opportunity here for a transformative trade agreement. I have always argued that both of our governments need to be ambitious about trade with one another. We may not be able to adhere to the old multilateral trade ideology and theology of the past, but we should take care of one another because we are high trust economies and we are strategic partners, quad partners, and that there ought to be ways to facilitate things that will help each other with our supply chain concerns coming from the pandemic. And this involves, making sure that each other's companies are treated fairly, that they aren't unfairly targeted in a discriminatory manner in each other's systems, that the regulatory processes are made easier, that there's mutual recognition of standards, that there are agreements on things where we excel globally, like on the digital economy. There is a lot that Delhi and Washington can do to play nicely with one another, and I think this is a real opportunity given the very strong existing relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump.
But the fact is that the proposed free trade agreement between India and the United States has been in negotiation for several years and nothing has come of it so far. Why do you think that this opportunity can actually lead to the completion of a free trade agreement? Because all the efforts so far have led to a lot of talk and negotiation, but no final outcome.
Well, a couple things. Number one, you may recall that in the last days of Trump 1, the Indian and U.S. governments were actually getting very close to a meaningful trade agreement. It wasn't a free trade agreement in the traditional sense. It didn't have all of the many different chapters, but it was going to meaningfully increase and augment U.S.-India trade. And there was sincere good faith effort by negotiators on both sides to push it through. Now, it didn't happen, but the threads of that can be picked up. They don't have to start from zero. And the other thing that clarifies the mind and sharpens the thinking and motivates both sides will be the potential for tariffs. I mean, this is a negotiating maneuver that obviously focuses the mind. And so I think that given the goodwill between Delhi and Washington, and given that we have an rapidly evolving strategic, economic, and technological convergence, that there are enough good reasons for Delhi and Washington to be able to make a good deal. Indeed, Delhi's probably better positioned than almost any other country on earth to strike a good and constructive deal. It does require, however, that there be meaningful concessions. And one of the observations about Indian trade deals in the past is that there haven't been these kinds of meaningful concessions that actually address some of the concerns of the counterparties. So again, this is a golden opportunity. When these sorts of things come along, let's try to seize them and make something really good happen for both of our countries and both of our peoples.
Well, you're saying that there must be counter offers made to the other party in that free trade agreement. But if that were to be done beyond what's been done in the past, then the likes of Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal and others in the Modi government would come under a lot of fire from the opposition. So there's the political reality of those concessions as well, which will need to be dealt with. So while Trump calls India a tariff king, his real target really is Beijing. Xi Jinping's administration has been in his crosshairs. He's spoken of increasing tariffs to 50, 60%, even if that's what you're calling a negotiating maneuver. But if he increases tariffs, how do you see that impact the bilateral relationship between China and the United States, which in any case is strained? And what impact could this have on the larger global economy in your view, Ambassador Keshap?
So this goes back to the experience that we all had during the pandemic. And I was in government during Trump 1. I was working on China policy very directly. And look, we all got burned by the supply chain exposures. I worked, and my whole team in the East Asia Bureau at the State Department worked intensely to try to get personal protective equipment, masks and gowns and gloves, back to the United States on an urgent basis when there was the COVID spike in New York City in March and April of 2020. And although we controlled and owned a vast majority of the production of that around the world, so much of it was in China and it was export banned. And so we had to put in giant amounts of effort to get around that. So there is a shared trauma from the exposure of supply chains during the pandemic that every country around the world is trying to address. The Biden administration worked on it through the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, which they launched with us at USIBC and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It was an important initiative. Let's see how it may continue, in what form, and under what branding in Trump 2. But the supply chain concerns are still there, and they are particular on things like defense articles, semiconductors, but also on pharmaceuticals, including pharmaceutical precursors. And this is where there's actually a really good opportunity for Delhi and Washington to work productively together to forge an even tighter and closer supply chain partnership that is really well set within the established high trust democracies of the world. And whatever impact it may have on U.S.-China relations, I would say that everybody wants to have constructive relations among the great powers, the great nuclear powers. But at the end of the day, the U.S. also has the right to indemnify its people from the risks of having supply chains that might cause some strategic discomfort.
Last question on immigration. Donald Trump wanting to act against illegal immigrants, but he also seems to have views on those who've been in the United States for a long time and have been in the queue to get a green card. He's also speaking of automatic green cards to foreign students, which seems to be promising. But how do you see, specifically in the Indian context, for those who are watching, how do you see the issue of immigration play out in the context of India and the United States?
Well, first of all, the United States is a nation of immigrants, and our great strength is our immigration and innovation engine. And I think it is broadly held across both parties and across the political spectrum that immigration is good for the United States. I think it is also equally broadly held that that immigration ought to be legal and lawful and structured and planned, and that it ought to bring into the United States, to inject more energy and vitality into our economy, those skilled people who really seek to contribute to the well-being of America. President Trump has been a businessman for decades. He knows what it takes to ensure a skilled and high-talent workforce across a diverse group of companies. And indeed, immigrants are contributing to the lifeblood of the United States in so many different ways. I don't even need to bore your audience with the examples. They know of them. They're all household names. So the challenge in America is that we need to forge a political convergence, an agreement that would continue the high-skilled innovation, entrepreneurship engine of immigration while addressing out-of-control, runaway, illegal immigration into the United States. And I think that President Trump has been very clear about that on the campaign trail, certainly over the past 4 years. And, you know, this is where you get down to politics, right? Ours is a very diverse, rambunctious democracy. And if you want to forge a consensus on something politically difficult, you've got to work to build a coalition in order to get meaningful legislation passed. And I wish the president-elect the greatest of success in ensuring that this engine of American genius continues unabated. And we have certainly benefited from the almost 5 million Indian Americans whom we have in this country, who are all wonderful citizens, and indeed a model community to show us the value of that immigration engine.
Ambassador Atul Keshap, for joining us from Washington, D.C. with your thoughts. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best. Hope to see you soon.